Hey guys, tonight we're opening a door into the life of someone who changed the way the world shops, reads, and thinks about possibility, Mr. Jeff Bezos. But before he was steering rockets or reshaping e-commerce, he was, well, just a curious kid with a screwdriver and a very patient mother. And before you sit back and relax, take a second to hit like and subscribe. Only if you find this valuable, of course. I'd love to hear what part of Jeff's story resonates most with you. Drop a comment below after the episode. Tonight, we're honored to speak with a true master of long-term thinking, someone whose ideas didn't just shift markets, they shifted minds. Let's begin right at the very beginning. Jeff, do you remember what you were like as a kid? Was there a moment even early on that made your parents go, okay, this kid might be wired a little differently?
Yeah, there was one moment that became a family legend. I was about 3 years old and had decided I didn't want to sleep in a crib anymore. I didn't negotiate or try. I just found a screwdriver and dismantled it myself, quietly. My mom walked in and I was sitting on the floor looking pretty satisfied with the disassembled frame.
That's wild. I think at 3, I was still chewing on crayons.
Well, I think it was less about rebellion and more about, well, wanting to understand how things worked. That never left me. I'd spent hours tinkering with gadgets, radios, computers later on. I wasn't necessarily a social butterfly. I was more the kind of kid who'd vanish into a book or build things in the garage.
Were your parents worried about that? You being so inward?
They were incredibly supportive. My mom had me young, and she and my stepdad Mike were both fiercely encouraging. They saw my intensity and didn't try to water it down. If anything, they fanned the flames. My grandfather, especially, he would later become a huge influence, but even as a kid, I felt like my environment gave me permission to be curious. And that was a gift.
It's powerful when someone sees your oddness has potential, isn't it?
Exactly. I think all inventors are a little odd, but if you're lucky, your oddness becomes your edge.
You mentioned your grandfather just now. I've heard he played a pretty special role in shaping who you became. What was it about him that stuck?
He was remarkable. His name was Lawrence Preston Gies. We called him Pop. He was a deeply practical man. He'd been a regional director at the Atomic Energy Commission, and after retiring, he moved out to a ranch in South Texas. That's where I spent most of my summers growing up.
From atomic energy to ranching, that's a pivot.
It is. But Pop wasn't someone who saw limits. One day he was fixing windmills. The next day he was teaching me how to castrate cattle or repair a bulldozer. I'm not even joking. The guy could do anything. Weld, build, analyze. And he never once acted like anything was beneath him.
So being out on that ranch wasn't just about fun and fresh air, it was education.
Totally. And not just technical education. What he really taught me, quietly, was resourcefulness and grit. If something broke, you didn't call someone, you figured it out. I remember watching him fix an old Caterpillar tractor for 3 days straight. No instructions, just trial, error, and calm persistence. And that stuck with me.
That sounds like the DNA of a founder right there.
I think so. He also taught me how to be gentle and strong at the same time. I remember once I was about 10 and I made a math-based comment about my grandmother's smoking habit. Something like, you've taken X number of puffs, which statistically reduces your lifespan by Y. I was proud of my logic. But my grandfather pulled me aside and in this really quiet voice, he said, Jeff, it's harder to be kind than clever.
Wow, that hits home.
Yeah, that sentence has echoed in my head for decades. In tech, in business, in life, kindness doesn't always scale easily, but it always matters.
You've got this amazing mix, logic from science and heart from those childhood lessons. But what were you like as a kid outside the ranch? I'm guessing you weren't exactly the type to blend into the crowd.
Not exactly, no. I was one of those kids who took things apart just to see how they worked. Radios, garage door openers, whatever I could get my hands on. Sometimes I couldn't put them back together, which my parents loved.
I feel like every great inventor has a graveyard of half-finished gadgets in their childhood.
Absolutely. I once turned my room into a kind of lab. I had an alarm system rigged up with tin foil and buzzer wires to keep my siblings out. My parents were always supportive, though probably a little concerned.
Concerned or impressed?
Probably both. I was intensely curious, and school only scratched the surface. I'd go to the library and read books on nuclear fusion when I was 12. I didn't fully understand them, but it was thrilling to even try. The idea that human beings could harness something so powerful, it just sparked something in me.
Did you have any idea back then that you'd become an entrepreneur? Or were you just driven by curiosity?
Curiosity, 100%. The word entrepreneur didn't even register until much later. But I did start my first business when I was a teenager. It was called the Dream Institute. My friend and I charged kids to come to this summer camp where we taught them about things like space travel and alternative energy.
Wait, you were running a science camp as a teen? That's so Bezos.
Yeah, it was very DIY. We printed flyers, talked parents into letting their kids join, and charged like $600 for a week. It was my first taste of turning ideas into something real, something that people would pay for. I didn't realize it then, but that was my first experiment in customer experience.
And it seems like you've been iterating on that idea ever since. You've always had this blend of bold imagination and methodical execution. So, after that early taste of building something with the Dream Institute, what came next? What were those college years like for you?
Aha, Princeton. That was where curiosity met competition. I studied electrical engineering and computer science, and let me tell you, the coursework was brutal, in the best way. I was surrounded by people who were off the chart smart. It forced me to level up fast.
Was that exciting or intimidating?
Both, but mostly exciting. You either sink or swim in that kind of environment, and I liked the pressure. I wasn't the top of my class by any means, but I loved learning about algorithms, logic systems, and machine learning. It felt like unlocking the rules of the universe.
Did you already see tech as your path, or were you still figuring things out?
I was definitely leaning into tech, but I didn't have yet a grand plan. One of the pivotal moments for me, though, came from a professor who talked about how we are on the verge of something massive, the information age. It stuck with me. I thought, okay, whatever I end up doing, it has to intersect with the shift.
That's such a core Bezos move, zooming out to see the big picture.
I've always believed that understanding trends, the big waves, is more important than just paddling fast. If you catch the right wave, you don't need to be the best surfer.
That's such a cool way to put it. So you finished Princeton, and then what? Straight into Silicon Valley?
Not quite. My first job was at a startup called Fidel, building a network for international trade. Then I went into the finance world, Bankers Trust, and eventually a hedge fund called D.E. Shaw. It was there I got a first-row seat to the power of data and scale. But something was still missing.
Let me guess, the entrepreneur in you was getting restless.
Exactly. I had the sense that I was learning a lot, making good money, but not building anything truly my own. The question that started to haunt me was, what's the regret I'll have at age 80 if I don't try something bold now?
That regret minimization framework you've mentioned, it's such a powerful lens. I think a lot of people listening have felt that itch too. The what if I don't try voice. When did that become too loud to ignore?
It was 1994. I was still at D.E. Shaw, New York. I came across the statistic. The internet was growing at something like 2,300% per year. I remember sitting at my desk, just staring at that number. It didn't feel like a statistic. It felt like a signal, like the future was knocking hard.
Was that the aha moment?
It was the moment I knew I had to act, but it wasn't smooth or brave right away. I actually went to my boss, David Shaw, a brilliant guy, and said, I want to start an online bookstore. And you know what he said?
I have no idea. What?
He said, that's a good idea for someone who doesn't already have a good job. And he was right. It was risky. I had a great role, upward trajectory, a decent paycheck, but this regret minimization framework, it hit me like lightning.
So walk me through that risk. How did you talk yourself through the risk?
I imagine myself at age 80 looking back. I knew I wouldn't regret leaving Wall Street, but I would regret never having tried to build something during this internet explosion. That clarity made it easy. Fear of failure faded when I thought about the regret of not trying.
So you left your job just like that.
Well, not overnight. I took a few days, talked to my wife, Mackenzie. She was all in, and that support meant everything. We packed our bags, got in the car, and drove across the country to Seattle. I wrote the first business plan for Amazon on that road trip, on a laptop, in the passenger seat.
Wait, you literally wrote Amazon's first plan in a car?
Yep. While she drove, I typed. That's how Amazon was born, with 90s maps, sketchy motels, and a laptop running Windows 3.1.
That image, a cross-country road trip with a laptop and a dream, it feels like a startup movie. So now you're in Seattle. No more steady income, no more safety net. What was day one like?
Day one? It was scrappy. We set up in my garage, classic startup style. We put up makeshift desks using doors and 4x4s. I'd read somewhere it was a frugal way to build tables, and it became our thing, the door desk. Symbolic, too. We were literally opening new doors.
And your first goal was books. Why books?
Books were perfect for the internet. There are millions of them, far more than any physical bookstore could carry, and they're relatively small, easy to ship. But beyond logistics, I just love the idea that our first product would be knowledge. It felt noble, useful, and a little poetic.
You weren't intimidated by the size of traditional bookstores?
Honestly, no. We weren't trying to beat Barnes & Noble on day one. We wanted to build the best online experience possible. It was about customer obsession. That was the heartbeat. I used to pack boxes myself, drop them off at the post office. Every little detail mattered.
Were there moments you thought, this is never going to work?
Oh, absolutely. There was a day when our servers crashed because of too many orders, and we celebrated. It meant people cared, but we had to scramble to keep up. One night I was on the floor packing books, and I noticed the tape dispenser was slowing me down, so I sent an employee out to get knee pads. Not software, not hardware, just something to make packing more efficient.
That's so refreshingly real. Like the future Amazon worried about tape and cardboard.
Exactly. There's no glamour in the early days, but those tiny wins, they're the foundation. It's in the grind that you build character and culture.
You mentioned culture, and that really makes me curious. What kind of culture were you intentionally trying to build in Amazon from the start?
That's a great question. From the beginning, we were obsessed with one thing, the customer. Everything else was secondary. I tell our early hires, we're not in the book business, we're in the customer experience business. That mindset shapes our culture deeply.
How did you make sure people really bought into that, especially when you were still so small?
We were ruthless about setting expectations early. I personally interviewed every employee at first. I looked for people who were smart, but also had a missionary mindset. I didn't want mercenaries. I wanted builders, people who were excited to invent, to solve hard problems, and to take ownership. I used to say, work hard, have fun, make history. And I meant every word.
Was there a moment when you realized the culture was actually working?
Yes, it was subtle but powerful. I remember walking into the office one night, maybe 11 p.m., and found two engineers still debating how to shave 2 milliseconds off our page load time. No one asked them to stay. They just cared that much. That's when I knew this was more than a job to them. It was a mission.
That kind of ownership is rare, but I imagine it also came with intensity.
Absolutely. Amazon's early culture was intense, maybe too intense for some. But I've always believed that excellence is never accidental. If you want to build something enduring, you have to invite challenge, be willing to argue, debate, and then commit as a team.
That's a very specific kind of emotional environment. High challenge, high trust.
Exactly. And it's not always comfortable. But magic doesn't happen in comfort zones.
Jeff, I've always been fascinated by the turning point, that moment when something small shifts and everything after that feels different. Was there a moment at Amazon where you realized this is going to work?
Absolutely. It was 1996, and we had just gotten a front-page article in the Wall Street Journal. Overnight, our traffic spiked. Orders flooded in, way beyond what we were prepared for. We were scrambling to pack books in the basement warehouse. My parents were taping up boxes. It was chaos, but it was beautiful chaos.
That sounds surreal. Did you let yourself enjoy it, or were you already on to the next fire?
A little of both. I remember feeling this wave of validation. Like, okay, maybe I'm not completely crazy. But it also lit a fire under me. Suddenly, this wasn't a scrappy idea anymore. It was a real company. People were trusting us with their money, their time. That responsibility hit me hard.
Was there a part of you that ever wanted to slow down, just take a breath?
The truth is, no. I was energized, exhausted, yes, but alive in a way I'd never been before. Building something from nothing is incredibly intimate. It's like raising a child. You're always watching for signs of life, always nurturing. When we hit that growth spurt, it felt like Amazon had taken its first real step.
And did the vision shift at that point, or did it just get louder?
It expanded. Books were just the starting point, a proof of concept. But from the beginning, I had this image in my head, the everything store. That moment in '96 told me it wasn't just possible, it was inevitable if we stayed customer-obsessed and kept inventing.
So that rush of orders, it wasn't just revenue. It was a green light for the long game.
Exactly. It was the moment Amazon went from idea to identity.
I'm so intrigued by that phrase you just used, the everything store. That feels so bold, almost poetic. When did that idea first come to you?
It was a daydream, honestly. I used to keep this little notepad on my desk at D.E. Shaw, and on one page I had written Earth's biggest bookstore. But even then, I knew books were just the start. The idea of creating a place where everyone could find anything, that was the real itch I wanted to scratch.
Was that vision something you shared with your team early on, or did you keep it tucked away for a while?
Early on, it was mostly internal. I didn't want to overwhelm the team. We were still figuring out how to get orders out the door without using kitchen tables. But in my mind, I was already browsing categories, electronics, toys, tools. I would mentally walk down these invisible aisles. It was this private cinema I'd replay every night.
That's such a vivid image. I love that. Invisible aisles. Did you feel like people got it, or did they think you were dreaming to big?
Oh, I'm sure some thought I was nuts, but one of the things I learned early on is that vision is often misunderstood at first. If it were obvious, someone else would have done it already. So I stopped trying to convince everyone. Instead, I focused on hiring people who felt it, who lit up when they heard the word scale.
So instead of selling the dream, you built a tribe that already believed in it.
Exactly. You can teach skills, but belief, that's something people have to bring with them. The vision of the Everything Store was never a slogan. It was a compass. And once we locked onto it, it gave every decision, big or small, a kind of clarity.
That's powerful. It's like you weren't just building a website. You were mapping out a whole new way to think about commerce.
And it started with a very simple question. What if there were no shelves?
I have to ask, you mentioned earlier about belief being more important than skills. That feels so counterintuitive in a world obsessed with credentials. How did you build that kind of culture at Amazon?
You're right, credentials are everywhere, but belief, that's rare air. From the beginning, I knew that culture wasn't just something that happened. It had to be intentional. So we made it explicit. We wrote it down, tested it in interviews, and lived it every day. One of the earliest questions I'd ask was, would I be comfortable having this person as a teammate in a foxhole? That sounds dramatic, I know, but startups are war zones in slow motion.
A foxhole. Now that's an image. But how do you measure belief? You can't put that on a resume.
True, but you can spot it. It's in the questions people ask. It's in how they respond when things break, and they always do. We looked for people who cared more about solving problems than blaming them. People who ran toward the fire, not away from it.
So attitude was the real currency?
Absolutely. One of our early team members once worked through Thanksgiving weekend, not because I asked, but because a customer shipment got delayed and it bothered him. That kind of ownership, you can't fake that. And I remember thinking, if we can scale this mindset, we're unstoppable.
Did that kind of intensity ever come at a cost?
Of course, culture cuts both ways. When you have high standards, you also have high friction. Some people self-selected out, and that's okay. Not everyone wants to build pyramids in the desert, but the ones that stayed, they were all in. They didn't just want to work at Amazon. They wanted to build the Amazon.
That's such a distinction, not just employees, but architects of something huge.
Exactly. We weren't chasing perks or beanbags. We were chasing impact.
Impact. I love that word. But with scale, doesn't something always get lost? How did you keep that fire alive when Amazon started to explode?
Oh, you're absolutely right. Growth is seductive. It flatters you, more customers, more press, more hires. But it also dilutes things if you're not careful. One of our biggest inflection points was when we grew past the point where I could know every employee's name. That really rattled me. So we had to get serious about mechanisms, tools to protect the culture, not just talk about it.
Mechanisms. That sounds very robotic. Laugh.
Fair, but hear me out. Mechanisms are the invisible bones of a growing company. For example, we had this thing called the bar raiser program. When someone was hired, it wasn't enough that they were good. They had to raise the average, literally. A bar raiser had veto power, even over me. That's how seriously we took it.
Wow. So you built a system that even challenged your own authority.
Exactly, because ego is expensive. If I hire someone because I like them, but they're not excellent, that cost compounds. The bar raiser was a mechanism to keep us honest. Same with our writing culture. We banned PowerPoints in favor of 6-page narrative memos. If you couldn't explain your thinking, you probably hadn't thought it through.
That must have felt radical at the time.
It did, and it slowed things down intentionally. People think speed means always saying yes, but real speed is saying no to the wrong things early. Those memos forced clarity. They made people uncomfortable, and that's where the magic happens.
So even as the company got faster, the thinking had to get deeper.
Exactly. Growth without depth is just noise. I wanted signal.
You know, Jeff, something that's always fascinated me is your decision to step away from the CEO role. Most people cling tighter as their legacy grows. Why let go?
Great question. That decision took years of thinking. Years. You build something from scratch, pour your soul into it, and then you realize it's time to step aside. It wasn't about losing love for Amazon. It was about knowing where I could add the most value and when someone else was better suited for what came next.
Was there a moment that made it clear to you?
Yes. I was flying back from a Blue Origin test launch, covered in desert dust, totally exhilarated, and I remember thinking, this is what lights me up now. I'd been straddling two worlds, Amazon and space, and I realized I couldn't serve both fully, not without compromise. So I chose the one that needed me more.
And yet letting go is so hard, especially for someone known to be so hands-on.
True, but being hands-on doesn't mean being a bottleneck. Andy Jassy had been with Amazon since 1997. He built AWS from scratch. I trusted him completely. I always said, if you care about your company, you have to build it to outlive you. That means succession isn't just a plan, it's a culture.
It's rare to hear a founder talk that way.
Founders often fall into the trap of immortality, thinking no one else can do it right. But ego is the enemy of legacy. My job wasn't to stay forever. It was to build something that could thrive without me. That's the real test.
And your heart, where does it live now?
Still with Amazon, always, but also in the stars. Literally. I believe Earth is the best planet in the solar system, by far, so our job is to protect it. And the only way to do that long term is to move heavy industry, like manufacturing, off Earth. Blue Origin is about building the infrastructure for that.
So not just space tourism?
Not even close. Tourism is a first step, a proof of concept, but the real goal is millions of people living and working in space. Think about it like building the internet. In the early days, people mocked it. Where are you going to send emails? Now it's the backbone of everything. Space will be like that, but it needs roads, plumbing, launch pads. That's what Blue Origin is working on.
That's such a long time horizon. Most people can't even think 5 years ahead. What gives you that patience?
A sense of mission. And I've been very lucky. Amazon gave me the resources to pursue this, but more importantly, I've always believed in planting trees under whose shade I may never sit. That's what long-term thinking really means. You make decisions not because they'll pay off next quarter, but because they're right for the next century.
Did you always feel that way?
Not at 18. Smiles. But over time, yes. Space changes your perspective. When you see Earth from above, no borders, no politics, just a pale blue dot, it humbles you. You start thinking not just about your life, but your species. What will we leave behind? What will we build?
I get chills hearing you say that. It's not just a business to you, it's a responsibility.
Exactly. It's not about escaping Earth, it's about saving it.
You know, Jeff, we've covered your childhood, Amazon, even space. But I'd love to talk about you, the person outside of all the headlines. What grounds you these days?
That's a great question. I think for me, it's relationships, family, my kids, my fiance, my parents. You know, the people who see you not as Jeff Bezos, founder of Amazon, but just Jeff. That keeps me human and honestly keeps me humble, too.
I imagine it takes a conscious effort to stay close to those roots, especially with the kind of empire you've built.
Absolutely. It's easy to get swept up in the machinery, meetings, decisions, shareholder calls. But I've learned that the higher you go, the more intentional you have to be about carving out space for life. It's not automatic. No one's going to hand it to you.
Has your definition of success changed over time?
Completely. In my 20s, it was about building. In my 30s, scaling. 40s, legacy. But now, success is how peaceful I feel when I go to sleep. Do I feel like I made the right call? Did I show up fully for the people I care about? That's the new scoreboard.
That's beautiful. I don't think most people expect the guy who runs rockets and trillion-dollar businesses to talk about peace and showing up.
Yeah, people are surprised by it, but I've learned that external success doesn't mean inner fulfillment. They're different games, and if you only play the first one, you end up rich but restless.
You seem more calm now, more centered. Is that something you had to work at?
Definitely. I used to operate on pure drive, energy, ambition, even ego. Now I operate from clarity. Doesn't mean I've stopped dreaming big, but I've become more selective about what really matters. I try to leave space for silence, for reflection. That's where the good stuff lives.
That feels like something we all need to hear right now.
We're all builders of companies, of families, of inner worlds, and all of that deserves care.
Jeff, we're almost at the end of our time, but I can't wrap this up without asking if you could speak directly to your 25-year-old self standing on the edge of leaving a secure job to start an online bookstore, what would you say to him?
I think I'd tell him, trust the regret. That was the compass that pointed me toward Amazon. I wasn't sure it would succeed, but I knew I'd regret not trying. And that's a more reliable feeling than fear or excitement.
That's such a powerful inner filter. Not, will this work, but will I regret not doing it?
Exactly. The logic was simple. When I'm 80, will I wish I had taken this swing? If the answer is yes, then swing. I didn't know how big Amazon would get. I just didn't want to be haunted by what if.
And now that you've swung, succeeded, failed, grown, do you still make decisions with that same filter?
All the time. It works for big choices and tiny ones. Even in Blue Origin, every mission, every risk, I ask, will I regret not doing this? If the answer is yes, that's the green light.
I think a lot of people are afraid of regret, so they try to avoid it completely.
That's the trap. Regret is not the enemy, it's the guide. If you ignore it, you get safety. If you listen to it, you get growth. And sometimes that growth changes the world.
Jeff, that gives me chills. You didn't just build a business, you built a philosophy for making bold, meaningful choices.
That means a lot. My hope is that people realize their life is the product of their choices, not their circumstances. And when you lead with courage instead of convenience, everything changes.
You've given us more than insights tonight, Jeff. You've given us a mirror to our own decisions. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Sophie. This is one of the most reflective conversations I've had. You ask questions that matter.
And that brings us to the end of tonight's conversation, a gentle, thoughtful ride through the mind and heart of Jeff Bezos. If you've been listening closely, maybe with a cup of tea in hand or the lights dimmed down low, I hope you felt what I felt, that behind the headlines, the business empires, and the buzzwords, there's a man who still remembers what it was like to lay on the floor reading sci-fi, who still chooses curiosity over comfort, and who still chases decisions he won't regret. Tonight wasn't about algorithms or quarterly earnings. It was about courage, about building with conviction when the future is foggy, about trusting your inner compass, even if it points somewhere no one else sees yet. So here's my invitation to you, wherever you are. What's your version of the online bookstore? What's the decision that your 80-year-old self might smile at or ache over? Let's not just admire visionaries from a distance. Let's get a little braver with our own stories too. Jeff, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for being here, for opening up, and for letting us hear the softer, wiser parts of your journey. To our listeners, if this resonated with you, I'd love for you to subscribe, and leave a comment, not for the algorithm, but so we can keep building a space for deep, honest, thoughtful conversations. Until next time, I'm Sophie. You've been listening to 20-Minute Podcast with Sophie. Stay curious, stay kind.